I really feel like talking today. I really feel um, like God's asking me to use my voice a little bit more, which I did quite a while ago, but I haven't made videos for a long time. And I think the main thing that's on my heart today, especially because I was praying yesterday and I was praying today, and during these prayers, I really realized some real heaviness in my heart that I hadn't realized before. And I imagine most of that is because I lived so much of my life in my head that it's only now, the last maybe year or so, maybe a bit more actually, but particularly the last year and especially the last maybe 6 weeks, 8 weeks, that I'm beginning to see and connect with and understand my heart in a way that I haven't been able to before. I think when you live so much here, this down here is such foreign land. Literally, when I was praying this morning, I started crying because I just said that I don't know. I don't know where my heart is. It feels so away, and without it, my life feels so empty. And there's no door for God to enter without it. There's no place for Jesus and His goodness and His mercy to be there with me. There's no place of real joy. Everything is empty and shallow and superficial, and things feel numb. There's a certain numbness to them. And my heart is so thirsty for a water that it cannot drink from the earth. And so the scripture that I heard, maybe, I mean, I've heard it before, but I heard it again maybe sometime in the last 2 weeks, maybe a week and a half, was Matthew 5:3, which is, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven." But more specifically, blessed are the poor in spirit. That was the thing that really felt conducive, I suppose, or felt like I can understand these words right now because I'm realizing my spirit by the day is becoming poorer. And by that, I think it just means is that when the spirit is so tired and really feels like so much is lost in your life, that there is so much emptiness, what I said before, that thing that's missing. I mean, I said before in terms of my heart, but I think poor in spirit is when the soul or some part of us, I don't really know, to be honest. I think it's more the mind, but it's also maybe something else. Maybe it is our heart and our soul, I don't know. But some part of us begins to realize that all of its hunger cannot be satiated by earthly things, and from its own wanting, in the sense that it in and of itself, I think it's the process where the soul or the spirit realizes in and of itself it is nothing. It is empty and walking on foreign land without God, holding it captive in a way. When some part of us begins to realize that all the things that it's seeking for on the outside, with this real desperation, this restlessness, and this hunger, like an arm that's just ever reaching for something, and no matter what it tries to grasp, it's not the thing. Even if it does grasp it or it doesn't grasp it, it's just like a hungry hand desperate to grasp at things. And I think the poor in spirit is that process, is when that part of us begins, or some other part of us maybe becomes aware that that is there and happening, and that the only place to turn to really is God, genuinely. I've cried so much about it lately that when your spirit falls to such lowliness, not loneliness, but such lowliness, I feel like there's no other place to go. There's no earthly realm to seek help and guidance. There's only the Lord, there's only Jesus, there's only God. There's only that which is unearthly in a way to reach to. And in that, we're forced to realize our ignorance, our incapacities, our inabilities, our arrogance, and our ignorance, I think. And I think the big one for me was definitely inabilities and incapacities. How, if I'm honest, the sort of arrogance I've had all my life, or at least maybe not all my life. I don't think I had it when I was very young, but it started to come about sometime through my school years. Just this sense of, well, arrogance, some sense of superiority in some way, in some, the feedback I was getting from my life became a throne that I would sit myself upon in a way, rather than remaining in that place in the chest that I said earlier that feels so foreign now in some parts of my life, that is to remain there, that the feedback that I had received or that we receive is not, it's not an altar, it's not a place to go to for worship, where we are both the worshipper and the worshipped, the idol and the idolizer. So I don't know the process. I don't know if it's inevitable, as in I don't know if the soul in its architecture has certain places of learning or places where God leaves the door open for learning to occur, or God leaves the door open for possibility. I almost want to say where God leaves the door open for us to stray from Him, to give us that option. Because something else that I'm realizing is that there is such a fundamental, I still don't even know the word. I've thought about this for so long, at least a year. And I still don't know the best way. I don't know what the word is. I don't know what noun, if it is a noun. But the journey, the process, I don't even know if it's a path of sin, for example. Because why would Jesus say, "Blessed are the poor in spirit," if the very road it takes to become poorly in spirit inevitably is one without Him, inevitably is one of wrongdoing, inevitably is one of sin, inevitably is one of betraying the heart, of betraying our conscience and what we know to be true and what isn't true. So in that sense, I don't know if it's on one level seems as though it's the wrong path, but maybe it's not the wrong path. And what I want to say is that the thing that I find difficult to describe is there is something so extraordinary about something that is a something that sits in a state of wholeness, separates from that state of wholeness only to return back to that state at a later time, where both things have become transformed. The thing that it was before is transformed, albeit slower than the thing that has taken its journey, as well as the thing that's taken its journey and being transformed because of that journey. I'm so convinced, I could swear to you that the moment a raindrop, for example, is close enough to the ocean where it realizes the ocean is there, so that it can, within itself, it has an experience of the ocean again, whether it's smell or whatever, I don't know. I don't want to particularly personify a raindrop, but I mean, all water has come from the ocean at some point, surely. I'm pretty sure that's true. But think of all the ways that first it departs, whether in vapor, in river, in lake, in iceberg, in so many ways that water is taken from that place, gone on this incredible trajectory and journey, only to at one point later in time, that very drop, if it could be extracted, returns and is transformed. It has new information. It has become various states. It is perhaps a different state. But all of that journey, no matter how many eons of time it takes for that return, that very moment when that raindrop meets the ocean again is the whole point. So being so far away from God for so much time, the whole point of that is to feel the ecstasy, I think, of that specific moment when the door opens again and there's something there. It's that return. Because otherwise, if we stayed the ocean forever, we would never know what it feels like to be the ocean until we have departed from it and become something else, and our state is altered. And upon that return, we are then filled with that thing that we once were again. And then we understand it from a different place. And I've realized for myself in so many ways, one creatively, one my femininity and being a woman, and my tenderness and my softness, my voice, Italian, Italy, because my parents are from Italy, but I was born in Australia and now I'm currently in Italy. So that too is a place of departure and a place of return over more than one generation, from my parents to me, not just within their lifetime. And I think that sometimes that is the trajectory too, is that the fruits themselves go off to foreign land, and then at some point, one of the seeds in the lineage will return and experience it anew. And I think there's something so unbelievably sacred about that. I don't know, again, if it's a path, if it's a journey. I don't know if it's a pilgrimage. I don't know if it's an inevitable infrastructure in the architecture of our lives and the trajectory of them, or if, I don't know, or maybe it's one of many possibilities in the human experience, which I suppose is probably more accurate. I don't know if we all go through the trajectory of separation and return, but I really think we do, if not the separation from God at birth, even to then at some point return to Him in the great beyond, in the point of reaching those heavenly gates. And being, what's the word? Being not interrogated, but being asked, what did you do with that one life? Where was your heart in it? Did you love it? I think it's probably going to be a question we'll all be asked is, did you love it? I hope I'm getting shivers, but did you love it? Did you give it your heart? But really, really, did you give it your heart? Or did your heart stay always trapped in this Stonehenge, sorry, and held captive within its own barriers, hoping that the light will get in instead of realizing that its light is what needs to come out? And I think if we are asked, did you love? I think that's what's being asked of us, is did the light from within us come out? Did the radiance, the Spirit of God, Santo Spirito, the Holy Spirit that was within us, did we let it out? Did we radiate and beam like the sun? Did people in our eyes see that trueness and see that love and that just that light, that greatness that children have in their eyes? It's such an aliveness. I've seen so many eyes of adults that are so sad and hardened and frightened and stiff, as though their soul was prisoner somewhere very, very deep down and had not seen the light in a very long time. And that light that should come from that part of them is so far away from the windows of the eyes that no light gets out. And so when you look in, it just looks like you're looking into darkness and nothing. And there's no life alive in them. I remember actually there was one time when I worked at a restaurant and an old man came in during a quiet day who had just done some shopping, some supermarket shopping, and he came in and he ordered a lasagna. I'll never forget it. Lasagna, technically. And he came up to pay and he didn't have enough money. And my boss said to me, just take whatever he has, don't worry, which annoyed me a little bit. I wish he had said, don't take anything, just let him have it. I mean, pasta is so cheap to make, especially at a restaurant. Anyways, and then when I looked at this man's eyes, there was such profound sadness that immediately once he left, I began crying. And the girl that I was working with, Rana, said, Kat, what's wrong? And I was like, this man, as though he had lifetimes of sadness. And now I would say, I don't know how he managed to carry that kind of sadness in him, because it bled from his eyes. He was so obviously full of it, his soul and spirit so withheld and in deep territory, in deep, I don't know, just deep rivers of sadness. It's where his soul lived, is what it seemed like. And it just made me so sad. I cried immediately when he left. I couldn't hold it in. It's as though not only did I see it in his eyes, but in the seeing it, some part of it melted into me as well. And it was terrible, really. For him at his age, I'm guessing probably in his 80s, to carry that, and God knows for how long. Was it an accumulation of things that led to that, or did something violent and terrifying occur to him in his later years that broke him? Perhaps a combination of both, perhaps many of both, perhaps many of neither, I don't know. But I suppose in some ways, he was sitting at the door of being poor in spirit. And to come back to that, I think that is part of it. In a way, there is a sort of entry point to that kind of poverty of spirit. There's a doorway or something akin to it, whereby once you get to that point, you kind of have to choose to continue on, even though you don't know what's happening to your spirit and how desperate it's becoming and sad and lonely. But you have to choose to go in further into that, to really encapsulate and really hold dear the tenderness of the poverty of your spirit. And so that within it, words can spring forth in confession at how weak and incapable and lost and in drought the spirit is, and how much it's suffering. Because if you don't continue on through that door, you don't get the process of transformation. Sort of like if you're, not necessarily, I was going to say sort of like if you're hungry and you're sitting outside of a restaurant, you're not going to get the food unless you go inside. You have to, there's a choice that has to be made where you continue to venture on and not steer away, even though it seems like you're walking yourself into darkness. But you really have to go in there, and you have to learn to feel comfortable in that kind of disarray and that kind of uncertainty and murky waters where you just don't know who you're becoming. That was part of what I cried about this morning, actually. I literally said, I don't know who you're asking me to become. I don't know who I'm becoming in this turmoil, in this raft of turbulent waters that sometimes are still but dark and scary, and other times it's like you're running it's like you're running this raft through tumultuous and lively waters. But there really is something about that place of being at the entry point, of realizing that you are poor in spirit, that you alone are nothing, that you alone are incapable and unknowing, and I don't know if I said incapable or uncapable, but that you are incapable and ignorant and not all knowing and not all able and not all giving. Because even in that, I realized how much in my life I was really driven and motivated to do the right thing and be a good person. But that trajectory, that energy from within that pushes me forth to do those things to the point where I can say that I was driven to be a good person, as opposed to goodness organically arising from me spontaneously for the moment at hand, as though the spirit itself realizes what goodness is now in this moment, and therefore springs the body into action, and therefore can take no credit for its goodness because it is unaware of and has no desire of its goodness, as though it were a puppet of God's hand, pretty much, as opposed to what I meant before, where this energy within is trying to be a good person, trying to do the right thing, trying to do this, trying to do that. It's almost as though it's some sort of mental construct or fragmentation that pushes its parts forward out into the world in the hope of restoration and repair, but it doesn't. It's left meek and miserable, and meek in a bad way, and miserable and never satiated, because it's then doing its own assessment on how good the good thing was that it thinks it should have done, as opposed to real goodness, which for me, I'm realizing at least, is that organic spring forth that is more conducive with and in alignment with and harmonized with the goodness and all-knowing of God. Because in his omnipotence, in his all-knowingness, which therefore means we do not have that, he understands why that good thing is the good thing in the full spectrum of it. He understands the extremities of goodness. We, if at best, only understand the proximity of goodness, the things that occur within our vision or within our senses. We can't even begin to fathom the extremities of goodness, or even, I would say, of what goodness is in and of itself. I know that Jordan Peterson would probably say something like, well, no, he's talking about goodness. I think goodness, that was something else, never mind. I think goodness is in harmony with truth and beauty. And I don't know if those things are the constituents of, or are elements as close to God as we can get, or at least going closer to the central point of God. But I would say goodness is not cerebral. It's not a decision of the mind. It's not, or maybe it's not a decision of brokenness. It's not a decision that tries to save the world. I don't think that's goodness. That doesn't mean goodness won't protect the world and won't protect those who suffer or who are in positions of oppression. But the assessment of victimhood, the assessment of oppression is very different, I think, when the heart is clear and the spirit sees clearly. And as I said, from within a moment springs forth from the spirit some sense of goodness. That's an assessment so much more fundamental than the assessment of the mind, the assessment of the thing that tries to do good because it needs to be a good person, whether because it's been told being a good person is good or right, or because it's been punished for not being a good person, and therefore the mind tried to assess, okay, well then what is a good person? We need to go in that direction because I did this thing before and I was punished and crucified, and we don't want to go through that again, so we're going to go this way. But the heart still says, no, 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 come back to me. Let me decide. Let me tell you. And through my conscience, let me tell you when you've gone astray, not the voices of others necessarily. And not that their feedback can't also presuppose some negative trajectory, but that this in here, this trajectory is our right one. At least it's mine. And when I'm without it, I feel such despair. I feel as though, and I know this sounds so dramatic, but I really feel as though I am body and flesh in motion, but there is nothing to pull it forth into the direction that is in harmony with my spirit and my soul. I really find it difficult to describe the sensation of being without it. But I feel like it's the place of direction of a very fundamental love, not a personal love. It's far more engulfing and enveloping and just a not personal love. I'd say it's steering more closer to a divine love. And therefore, it's without God when I'm without this place, because I think this is, when I think from my experience, I sense that this is his throne within us. This is the place where he resides. And if we disconnect from this place, we lose his sovereignty within us. We lose the capacity to hear his voice and his guidance and his direction through an almost spontaneous judgment that over time will reveal the overarching construction of his morality, but is almost impossible for the mind in one lifetime to fully grasp and understand. But perhaps in our collective trajectory of listening to that voice and being guided by it, the fullness, the full orchestra of his morality will be revealed in all of us over time, that we can see and learn and witness through our art, probably more than anything else, really. I don't think there's any other place other than art where we can really honestly reveal those things, other than maybe documented lived moments, sort of like the Bible, the New Testament specifically. But I think that's the only way we really reveal all of him, is in parts, in moving motion across time and space, in a trajectory of thousands of years, where slowly, slowly all these things are documented and reveal him and his righteousness and his goodness and why he's all-knowing and omnipotent and omnipresent, and why he's that all-loving father, I suppose. Because in our little minds, we can think in our life of suffering, we're in the wrong place and doing the wrong thing. But like the trajectory of my family, how I said that my parents left and now I've returned, therefore the trajectory could have happened over generations, perhaps generations who suffer for tens of generations lose their hope and think that they've gone astray and that God has abandoned them because their arc seems slower and more painful in its account and accumulation, but perhaps in the end far more glorious than the ones that occur in just a simple solitude life. The light just went out. I think that's it. Ciao.